Welcome to Daily Devotional. Today we talk about a topic of how John Lennox argues with a scientist. So let's watch the video.
Words. You look up at that screen there. You see words. The moment you see words, you know there's a lot of electronics represented up there and a lot of high-powered technology, but you can tell instantly that there's a mind behind what's up there, can't you? It's an instant intuition, upwards, not downwards to mind.
I think the first verse that I would like to point out is in Genesis 1:1 that talks about the Christian worldview of who God is and the Christian worldview of what Christians should know and believe in, or in other words, how Christians should think about God is that in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. So God is a creator and God is our creator and God is a creator of the world.
Mindless, unguided processes. And that's the point of my menu illustration. Shall I bring that in?
I was just going to say you've practically already brought it in because it's the same idea. I was referring to it with Suzanne today that we've got to talk about the roast chicken on the menu, so now's the time.
Well, very good. And this has happened several times in my college. We have nice dinners, and this particular occasion, our seating plan is arranged, and there was a very famous biochemist, actually from Oxford, and he was sitting beside me, and he made the mistake of asking me what I did. And I said, I'm a pure mathematician. And his face grew very solemn, and he said, how dreadfully boring. So not to be outdone, I said, well, yes, I understand my subject is not all that sociably acceptable, but I tried to make up for it by being interested in the really big questions. He said, what big questions? Well, I said, questions of where mathematics fits into science, where it fits into the big story. Is there a big story? Oh, he said, it's far worse than I thought. Listen, he said, I'm an atheist. I'm a reductionist, we've nothing to talk about, and we're going to have a really miserable evening. So I said, are we? I said, you just hit a spark with me. Reductionism is fascinating. I said, I know at least 3 kinds. What kind are you? Well, I'm a kind Irishman. I had to help him a little bit. I said, you know, I'm a reductionist too. Most of us are, in the sense that if we got a complex problem, we'll try and split it into simpler problems, solve those, and then get insight on the big problem. He says, I do that. Well, I said, we have something to talk about. But he said, you know, I don't.
I think that is a good rule for apologists or in terms of any other problems is that the reductionist mentality is that whenever we get a question or we get a question from a person, what we can do is that we can reduce and decrease the size of that problem to make it smaller, to break it down to easier answer the question.
Mean that. I said, I know exactly what you mean. You're an ontological reductionist, from the Greek word ontos, meaning being. Everything you can reduce to physics and chemistry. He said, exactly. So I said, why don't we do an
So the worldview of a reductionist or some scientists is that they reduce everything to molecules or they reduce everything to atoms. But for the worldview or for a Christian, what they think is that God is the foundation of everything on earth and that created the earth.
experiment then? He said, what? At the dinner table? I said, sure, this is Oxford. So I pick up the menu, I show it to him, and he reads roast chicken. He said, what's the problem? I said, none for me, but how did you work that out? Well, it says it. How do you know that? Well, I've learned that these marks, they represent letters of the English alphabet, and in that form and in that order, they have a meaning. Okay, I said, you're a reductionist, yes?
So let me point the next verse that I have in 2 Timothy 3:16, which says, all scripture is God-breathed and useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness. I think look at this verse differently. It's saying is that words can be useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness. What this really means is that there are certain words, and there are words in general that have the ability to teach, and therefore they convey a certain meaning. This may seem like a stretch, but I think the idea that can be gained from this verse is that words do bring a form of meaning.
Everything in terms of physics and chemistry, yes? Okay, explain to me the way those marks carry meaning in terms of the physics and chemistry of the paper and ink. Silence. And his wife, who was sitting beside him, very nicely said, get out of that if you can.
So I think the core idea that Dr. John Lennox is saying here is that meaning is not associated with the way things are made. Meaning that what I'm trying to say is that they don't have a relationship in a certain sense if you just base it on science alone. Therefore, atoms and molecules and ink on a paper has no meaning unless it's being interpreted by an intelligent mind.
But now this is the honest bit. He didn't try. He said, I can't. He said, you know, for 40 years I've gone into my lab here in Oxford believing that can be done. And he said, it can't, can it? I said, well, you're telling me? He said, of course it can. You can't do it without a mind. I said, no, you can't. I said, what do you study in your research? DNA, he said.
So let me go to the next verse where it says, answer a fool according to his folly, or he will be wise in his own eyes. So I think the key thing here about what is happening is that a person, I'm not trying to put down scientists, but I'm trying to say people have their own beliefs and they understand their own beliefs, and they won't understand or care about other people's beliefs, and that is what a person is defined as a fool. A fool is unable to only he's unable to take the opinions of other people, but only focuses on his opinion and is boxed up in his own world.
I said, what about that? You've looked at 4 letters, R-O-A-S-T, 5 letters, and you've come to the conclusion there's a mind behind them on the menu. What about the 3.5 billion letters you study? Oh, he said, that's chance and necessity. I said, pardon? Chance and the laws of nature. He says there's no alternative. I said, oh, of course there's an alternative. And it's the same one that you recognize by 5 letters. I said, you have a real problem. And our culture has a real problem, because now we come to the deeper question, how do you define science? Because for many people it's off limits to introduce a mind as a source for information. You see, this is the key thing that makes all the difference. For many years, unfortunately, misled by a certain physicist, many people have believed that information is a physical quantity. It isn't. It's an abstract quantity. And you see, for me, that's the end of materialism, because no amount of material processes can generate abstract information like words. But the biblical revelation now comes in and turns it all upside down and says, in the beginning was the Word. This is a word-based universe. And life, I believe, required God, who created the whole thing, to do something special. Mm-hmm. And you see, that is revolutionary today. It's ruled out in principle by many people, but they've no scientific reason for ruling it out. The evidence is so strong that people cannot see it. So that's a little bit moving in that direction. There's a lot more that one can say, but it seems to me that what the Bible is doing is putting its finger on something utterly profound. John, at the very beginning of his gospel, says, in the beginning was the Word. That's an existence statement. The Word already was. The Word is eternal. All things, well, many versions unfortunately say were made by him. That's true, but that's not what it says. What it says is all things came to be through him. That is, the universe is word-based. Now, the current views of the astrophysicists are that the universe came from nothing, and it created itself. So now our culture is faced with a raw choice between God and nothing. I never thought we'd reach that. But nothing is a very interesting topic. And I'm tempted to say something about it, but since it's nothing, I won't.
So that's a reply by Dr. John Lennox regarding the power of words and the power of meaning in our lives. I think it's very interesting to note that as he was talking about John 1:1-3, there's an inherent meaning in this verses saying that God is the Word and God creates meaning, and there's a certain aspect of giving meaning that there is an author that needs to give meaning. So for example, if I write certain things on a piece of paper, I am giving it meaning. I have to give it meaning, and I'm the one that constructed it based on an intelligent mind. So how does this tie into our Christian life? This is saying that science in itself, the current understanding of science itself, cannot give us meaning, but it can only give us the structure of why certain things happen, and science is not comprehensive enough to understand the structure of everything as well. So I think if next time you see a scientist or an atheist friend, ask them how do they get meaning, and I think their only reply they can give you is that life has no meaning. Life has no meaning at all. Yep. So if you like videos like this that brings together entertainment, apologetics and the Bible, please like, share and subscribe. Thank you and God bless.